Turn left at the exit to enter Woodsboro, California, the safest horror movie town.
Nobody has ever loved the first Scream more than 16-year-old me. I loved it so much. I also had a massive crush on Billy, a big enough crush that I even saved edits of him. The 20th of October, 2021, I was 16 then. Just so you know, like this is what I was in love. Welcome back, Mouse Pack, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Belle, and for the entire month of October, I'm doing this thing called 31 Days of Halloween. This means that every single day I will be giving you the backstory and an unnecessarily thorough recap of a scary, disturbing, or otherwise set on Halloween type of movie. I've also made a playlist. It will be in my description box or my comment section. I'm gonna stop talking and let's get into it. I made a Notion page to keep me on track. And that's how many notes I have. Today, the movie that we're going to be talking about to kickstart off this whole 31 Days of Halloween is Scream. Arguably one of the best horror movies in the world. I also have a boo-boo. I accidentally slid the top of my finger against a razor, so don't mind that. I wanted to talk to you about Scream while I put on my makeup because I love putting on makeup to go nowhere. Isn't it fun? Some could say wasteful. I say it's exploring my creative talent. If you're looking for a good Halloween movie or a movie that's essential for Halloween, I would 1000 billion% recommend Scream. So what exactly is Scream? Let me give you some backstory and introduction to it before I go through every single plot point. Scream is classified as a self-aware horror movie. Now what this means is that all the characters in the movie, they know what a horror movie is. They know the tropes of a horror movie. They know the conventions of a horror movie. They're not dumb. Well, essentially they just know what's going on and they can't be fooled. Or can they? We'll see. It was released in 1996 and is considered a slasher film, which is basically where they just hack into people. It was written by Kevin Williamson. It's very important to acknowledge the writers of a film, not just the director. The director was Wes Craven. He has produced so many horror movies. This movie stars a lot of famous people. I'm most familiar with, he plays Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, so that's where I know him from. And also Courtney Cox. I know Courtney Cox, not from Friends, I know her from Bruce Springsteen's 1984 Born in the USA tour, opening night, Minnesota. She danced with him on stage. Yeah, and this concert is really pivotal for me because, I was actually there. I was actually at this concert. Like, I was like front row. I could practically touch the stage. I was like right at the very front. It was for my 18th birthday. Now, obviously, if I saw that concert when I was 18, this means that now I'm 57, but yeah, I know a lot of people tell me that I look really young for my age. Before I explain the plot of Scream to you, I want to introduce you to our main character called Sidney Prescott. Now, who is Sidney? She is a 17-year-old senior and she goes to the high school, Woodsboro High in California. This school is so important to me because I went there. I actually went to Woodsboro High. Isn't that so cool? Yeah, like I went there many, many years ago, obviously, because I'm like 57 now. If I still had my yearbook, I would show you my picture, but obviously like given to one of the grandkids. Now, Sidney, she lives with her dad all by herself, no siblings, no mum. Her mum sadly passed away, which we will get into later. But for now, all you need to know is that her mum passed away. I would say that at the start of this movie, she has a very sad, quiet kind of presence. I'll definitely be explaining more of her as the video progresses, but for now, that's all you really need to know. Let's talk about scene one. I would say that scene one is very important because it sets the tone for the rest of the movie. And even though we are not introduced to Sidney immediately, what happens in this scene is very, very crucial. In this scene, we're introduced to a high school student called Casey Becker. Her parents are out, she's home alone. As she is fussing around the kitchen, the phone rings. And it's essentially just some dude who's messing with her. He's like, oh, who is this? Even though he called first, so obviously he knows who it is because he called first. And when Casey's like, well, who do you want to reach? He's like, I don't know. So obviously she hangs up and then he calls back again and is like, oh, I'm just calling up because I wanted to apologize to you for calling up before. Then he tells her not to hang up because he wants to talk to her. She hangs up anyway. I also want to reiterate that she is home alone. She lives in a very beautiful house, but it is in the middle of nowhere. She has no neighbors. All the blinds are open. She has a lot of glass doors. Everything in the house is unlocked. She is so far away from civilization. It's scary. Yes, she has a nice pool, and yes, she has a nice tree outside of her house, but she is so far away from civilization. Now, poor Casey, all she wants to do is just cook her popcorn and sit down and watch a movie, but this dude keeps harassing her. He calls her again, and he's like, why don't you want to talk to me? Then he's like, what's your name? And then he's like, what's that noise in the back? And she's like, I'm cooking popcorn. And he's like, well, I only eat popcorn when I watch a movie. And she's like, yeah, I want to watch a movie. And then he's like, what movie are you going to watch? Basically, we find out that he really loves scary movies. And then he asks her if she likes scary movies. She says that she likes Halloween and also the first Nightmare on Elm Street one, but only the first one because the rest of them suck. If you want to hear about Halloween and the first Nightmare on Elm Street, then stay tuned, because for the next 31 days, like I said, every single day I'm going to be talking about a horror movie, including those two, of course. I also have a life hack. So a lot of the times the sequel is never better than the original movie. We know this. The only way I have found that I've ever been able to enjoy a sequel is if there is a very large gap between the first and second movie and the time in which I watch it. So for example, if I want to enjoy Scream 2, I need to watch it on its own, probably like 5 years from now. Now back to Scream. The dude on the phone asks her if she has a boyfriend, and Casey very, very slowly walks around to lock the doors because they're not already locked. People who don't lock their doors and don't lock their windows, these people scare me, because they obviously fear nothing if they are willing to live their lives in a house where everything is unlocked and anyone can break in, or people don't even need to break in, they can just open the door. Then the dude on the phone is like, what's your name? I want to know who I'm looking at. And Casey panics because she's like, hang on a second, what do you mean? He's like, oh no, I just asked for your name because I want to know who I'm talking to, even though that is not what he said. She looks outside one of her glass doors, one of her many glass doors, just to make sure that nobody's there. She is very, very scared, so she hangs up despite the guy telling her not to hang up. He rings again and he's like, if you hang up, I will gut you like a fish, which is very, very specific and paint a very unsettling image in my mind. Casey is really scared. So instead of just slowly walking around to lock the doors, she's like sprinting around the house. The door should have already been locked, but that's beside the point. Remember, her house is really big. It's a really nice house. That means there's a lot of doors that are left unlocked. She naturally asks him what he wants, and he says that he wants to see what her insides look like. She bursts into tears, and then the doorbell rings. This is why this movie is classified as self-aware, because the dude rings her up again, and he says, and I quote, "You should never say who's there. Don't you watch scary movies? It's a death wish. You may as well come out to investigate a strange noise." It's the fact that they are actively talking about horror movie tropes in a horror movie is why it is called self-aware. So Casey, she's now hysterical, and she's like, I'm gonna get my football playing boyfriend to beat you up or kick you or something like that. And the dude is like, ooh, I'm so scared, I'm shaking in my boots. The dude is like, oh, your boyfriend? Is his name Steve? Of course, Casey is shocked and scared by this. The guy on the phone is like, turn on your patio lights. So she does, and Steve is out there, duct taped to a chair. At first, Casey's gonna be a good girlfriend and like go out to investigate, and the guy on the phone is like, don't do that. Now play a game with me and turn back off the patio lights. Now, Steve doesn't want her to turn the patio lights off, which is completely understandable. A lot of people are scared of the dark. I'm not. I think there are a lot of other things to be scared of other than the dark. Casey just listened to the guy on the phone, because when the guy on the phone is threatening you and saying all this weird stuff and he's duct taped your boyfriend to a chair, you can listen to him. Basically, this game that Casey has to play is very simple. She'll be asked a question and she needs to get it right in order to survive, in order for Steve to survive. The warm-up question is very simple. It is, what's the killer in Halloween? Now, do you know who that is? Who is the killer in Halloween? You get 5 seconds to guess. Have you done it? Okay, it's Michael Myers. Obviously, Casey knows. That was just the warm-up question. Now let's get on to the actual question. And the actual question is, who is the killer in Friday the 13th? The original Friday the 13th. The first one. Casey guesses Jason, which is, it's wrong. It's not Jason, it's Jason's mother, obviously. If you got that question wrong, don't even worry, because I'm also going to be talking about the first Friday the 13th movie on, you guessed it, Friday the 13th, because at least where I live, October 13th also falls upon a Friday, meaning it's going to be Friday the 13th. Because Casey got the answer wrong, Steve gets it. Steve gets his entire stomach cut open. Casey's not done. She still has one question left to determine if she herself is going to die or if she herself is going to live. The final question is honestly incredibly terrifying. It is, which door am I at? The front door or the patio door? This is where things become incredibly intense. A patio chair is thrown through the window, everything shatters. The popcorn that Casey was cooking before is now on fire. Casey has acquired a knife from the kitchen, and the dude who's wearing a Ghostface mask, so I will now be calling Ghostface, runs across the living room. Thankfully, all is not lost for Casey, because as she sneaks outside, she sees her parents' car coming down the lane. She's like hiding underneath the window. Ghostface smashes that window. She punches him, runs, pauses to look at Steve's dead body. Now Ghostface comes from nowhere. He propels himself out of a window and crash tackles her onto the ground like a WWE wrestler. Casey is really, really trying. She runs away again, but it is no use because Ghostface gets her, grabs her, and stabs her in the heart. This poor girl, she got a broken heart from having her boyfriend be killed, and now she literally has a broken heart because it's been stabbed. She kicks off Ghostface and drags herself across the grass. By now, her parents are out of the car. They are walking inside the house. If they had just looked to the side, they would have seen their daughter crawling across the ground, but they didn't do that. Things can never be that simple. You're probably wondering, why didn't she just scream? First of all, she was just stabbed, she's in a lot of pain, but she also did try to scream. It was like this. She tried, okay? She tried to scream, but it came off like a wheeze and her parents didn't notice. The inside of the house is pandemonium. The alarm is going off. Casey's mom is really, really, really worried about where her daughter is. Now, Casey, when she escaped, she still had a phone in her hand. Well, her mom calls that phone and can hear her daughter's wheezing, dying breaths as she's being dragged across the ground because Ghostface is now dragging her. The dad is all like to the mom, go down to the Mackenzies, who I'm assuming are the neighbors, and call the police. I mentioned at the start that her house had a tree. As her mom walks outside, she sees the tree. She will never be able to look at that tree the same way ever again because her daughter is hanging from it. Her daughter's intestines are coming out. She is just not in a good way. That's the only way I can put it here, is that poor Casey, she went through a very traumatic death. It was very painful. It was very gruesome, and she is sadly no longer alive. The last image we get from that scene is the dad frantically running to get to his daughter. That exact same night, we're introduced to Sidney. Remember Sidney? I talked about her at the start. Sidney is sitting at her computer, typing away on it. It's storming outside when there is a commotion outside of her window. Someone is throwing rocks at her window, and then a guy comes barreling in after. It is Billy Loomis, the guy from the edit that I was showing you before. This is the window that he sneaks into. She's like, what are you doing in here? And she screams, which is fitting considering the title is called Scream. Now for Billy, I would say that Billy is a little bit on the edgier side, but according to everyone else, he's perfect. Like, everyone thinks he's perfect, but his eyes are a little bit shifty. I mean, that's my opinion. Billy is not allowed to be in Sidney's room, and he's in Sidney's room, so this is obviously a cause for concern. Her dad heard her scream and comes flying up the stairs to check on her. I think that's a nice thing to do. When you hear someone screaming, you check on them to make sure they're okay. Here is where we find out that he is going to an expo thing over the weekend. He'll be leaving the next day, very early in the morning, and won't be getting back until Sunday. Sidney will now be alone. Remember, she got no siblings. Her mum is dead. She has no one. She's going to be alone. And there is safety in numbers. We never feel scared when we are in a group of people, unless you have social anxiety. What am I saying? There is a consensus that there is safety in numbers. Anyway, her dad is very concerned, and he's like, I heard screaming. And she's like, By the way, I need to mention how he is being kept out is she has a door the bedroom door, but then she also has a wardrobe door. So if she opens the wardrobe door, it's like that, and then the door can't open because the door is there. I feel like I'm explaining that very terribly, but all you need to know is that another door is barricading her door. Does that make any sense? Eventually, she gets him away, and now it is time to deal with Billy. Billy is roaming around her room, and she's very, very anxious, which I think is a testament to her personality. She doesn't like breaking rules. She likes doing things correctly. Now is a very sort of interesting scene, and I didn't want to talk about it, but I just think I have to. When she says that she wants him to leave, he's all like, I was watching a movie, and I was thinking about you. Guess what movie it was? It was The Exorcist. Yes, that is right. He was watching The Exorcist and was like, you know what, Sidney, I was thinking about you watching this. Side rant, I will be also talking about The Exorcist. His explanation is what gets me, okay? So for The Exorcist, he said that when he was watching it on TV, all of the good stuff was cut out. So I'm assuming the extra gory parts, that was all cut out. So it could be edited for TV. So he says that him and Sidney's relationship now is edited for TV because at the start, they were all really obsessed with each other. His exact words were they were all hot and heavy at the start, and now they're not. Now it's like their relationship is edited for TV because it's kind of like all dried up in the passion department. Sidney feels a little bit guilty about this, so they start making out before finally she's like, no, you actually have to leave now. Billy then tells her that he doesn't want to rush her. She flashes him, he leaves. As Billy leaves, she's kind of just leaning against the wall and she looks a little bit disheartened. This whole experience shows us that Sidney has gone through something that has warped her perception of intimacy. Could this be linked to her mother's death? You'll have to keep watching to find out. This next scene takes place at my old high school, Woodsboro High, because like I said, I actually went there. Basically, there is pandemonium. I love using that word due to Steve and Casey's death. Like everyone's panicked, everyone's worried. There's police and news reporters. We'll talk about one specific news reporter a little bit later. Here we then meet Sidney's best friend. Her name is Tatum. I would say Tatum is funny. She has a lot of good one-liners and like witty things that she says. A lot of people like her. She's blonde and fun, and I would say she is a really good contrast next to Sidney because, you know, Sidney's a little bit quieter. Everyone in the school is interrogated. There are two people I want to talk about in this interrogation room. First, we have Arthur Himbry, Principal Himbry. He doesn't really take any nonsense. He's stern and serious, but he literally loves his students. Like, he says that. He literally says over the loudspeaker so everyone can hear, your principal loves you, stay safe. And then the next person I want to talk about, because they are crucial to the plot, is Dewey. Oh, sorry, not Dewey, Detective Riley, because he doesn't like being called Dewey when he's on the job. He is Tatum's brother. He's very sweet, sensitive. No one takes him seriously, like no one. All the kids are told to walk home promptly from school grounds, to never talk to strangers, and to stay in groups of 2s and 3s. That is how they're gonna survive being killed. By following those 3 rules. Outside, on the bench, the school bench, we meet Billy, Randy, and Stu. Now, Stu is Tatum's boyfriend. Billy is, of course, Sidney's boyfriend. And Randy is just there. Randy is the smart guy. He's like the movie geek. He has a very big mouth. He is a know-it-all, and he is very insensitive about murder and death. Stu, Tatum's boyfriend, is also very insensitive to murder and death. He's very blunt when talking about those topics. As they're outside, all of them are talking about the murders. Well, Sidney's not really. Stu thinks it's impossible for a female to be a murderer because it takes a man to be able to kill someone. The topic moves on to, well, who could have killed Casey and Steve? What could have been a motive to kill Casey and Steve? First of all, Stu thinks that the killer 100% has to be a male because killing someone is a man's job. We also find out that Stu used to date Casey. So is that a motive? Ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, crimes of passion? This entire conversation, Sidney is very, very, very uncomfortable, especially when Randy starts talking about slicing and dicing. It also doesn't help that Stu has a very dark sense of humor. As we know, Casey was hung and her liver was hanging outside of her body because her insides were hanging outside of her body. So he kept on saying, liver alone, like leave her alone but live her alone because her liver was hanging out of her body. Yeah. Anyway, then Billy's like, shut up, Stu. That's how school went. This next scene is focused on Sidney's house. Sidney gets off the bus. Catching the bus after school is definitely an experience. As Sidney gets off the bus, we see that her house is very isolated. There seems to be a trend in this movie where everyone's house is just very isolated. It's probably got something to do with the fact that it's a small town. Why am I still getting notifications on this? It's 444 angel numbers. What is this? What is this? Sidney is very isolated. She also has no neighbors and her dad isn't home. This is not a good thing, especially considering there is a killer on the loose. Good thing that Sidney has a brain and she knows that this is a bad thing. So she decides that she's going to stay at Tatum's house. So she goes around the house and she like gets all of her supplies and belongings. Now she has all her things packed up. She sits down and she turns on the news. Here is where we meet Gale Weathers. I want to make a joke about her being a weather reader, but she already does that herself. Like at the end of the movie, she makes a joke about that. So she's already beat everyone to it. I would say that Gale Weathers is a very pushy, bossy person. Career-driven, yes, but also insanely annoying for everybody else. Remember when I said that Sidney's mom was dead? Well, she didn't just die of natural causes. No, she was raped and then murdered. And that happened a year ago. So it's still very fresh in Sidney's mind. It also explains why she is like... I'm sorry, I like my foundation shaken. This just explains Sidney's like extra uncomfortableness around gore. Sidney then falls asleep. This is not the right brush. Sidney then falls asleep. Just a nice little nap. When she wakes up, it's nighttime. And how is she woken up? With a phone call. Who's on the phone? Is it Ghostface? No, it's actually just Tatum. She's all like, I want to stop by the video store. I'll see you soon. And we get a little glimpse at the clock. It's 7 o'clock when she calls. Side note about video stores. I wish that video stores were still around. It makes me really sad that they're not. I don't know. You might have them where you live, but where I live, no. There is nothing. There's not even those kiosks where you can like rent movies anymore. The phone rings again. And this time, it actually isn't Tatum. This time, it's Ghostface. It kind of follows the same pattern as like what happened with Casey. Like, oh, do you like scary movies? Blah, blah, blah. Here we find out that Sidney does not watch scary movies, nor does she like them. She'd honestly hate what I'm doing right now, considering she doesn't like any scary movies. She says it's always the same thing, a stupid killer stalking a big booby girl who can't act and who always runs up the stairs instead of running out the front door when the killer is chasing her. Keep in mind, Sidney doesn't know who she's talking to. She thinks she's talking to Randy. Remember Randy from before? The really insensitive guy who's a movie geek. She thinks she's talking to him. Spoiler, she's not. But to prove that she's not scared, she like goes outside. It's night. It's dark. She's alone. She's in the middle of nowhere. But she goes outside. Is this a bad idea? Yes, this is a bad idea. Don't do this. I should probably put my hair back when I'm doing foundation. Also, side note, I cut my hair. It was pretty long before, like too long. So I got it cut. And it's also kind of Sidney's length now. So twinning. Anyway, back to Sidney. So she is outside. Yes, but when she comes back inside, she gets attacked by Ghostface. She too fights back. So she is going at him. Before, she was all like, the girl always runs upstairs instead of running out the front door. Well, guess where she runs? She runs upstairs. So she's just technically bashing on herself now. And let me just say, everything happens like insanely fast. It's very intense, which is why I'm doing foundation right now, because me putting on foundation is an intense experience. Sidney runs to her room. She slams the door. She also slams her closet door so that when the door is opened, it doesn't open fully. Ghostface sticks his hand through and is like, hello. But like not really, because he's still holding the knife. So instead he's like slashing the knife through the air. Sidney tries to call the police, but she can't because the phone line is disconnected. So she goes onto her computer and she messages 911. I don't really know what it is, but she like types 911 in. It's like, oh, what's your emergency? But when she turns back around, Ghostface is gone. At that exact same time, Billy, her boyfriend, he comes through her window. At first, Sidney is very, very happy to see him. She's just hugging him, crying, sobbing, like, but then Billy's phone falls onto the ground and this like shatters the illusion of everything. Sidney comes to her senses and I think she's putting the pieces in her mind like, hang on a second. Ghostface was just there. He goes and then Billy appears. That's suspicious. She runs away from him. Keep in mind, there's a lot of running in this movie. So she runs away from him. She's like sprinting down the stairs. She opens the front door, and who does she see? She sees Ghostface. Not really, no. She sees Dewey. Dewey is wearing Ghostface masks. I mean, kind of, yes, but he's standing at the door. And to cut a long story short, Billy is arrested. Which, like, yeah, I mean, it's very suspicious that all transpired like that. Tatum arrives, and then Gale Weathers appears, and she wants to harass Sidney because she's just a harasser. If I had to describe Gale Weathers in one word, I would call her a harasser, because that's what she does. She harasses people, like all news reporters and all paparazzi people. Even though she's not paparazzi, she's a news reporter, whatever. It's this scene where we really see just how bossy Gale is, because she has like a cameraman. His name is Kenny. The recurring thing about his character is that he's very slow. What is that? Ew. Like, this just shows how bossy she is, because she's like snapping at him. At the police station, as Sidney is sitting with Dewey, we find out that nobody knows where her dad is. He's supposed to be at that expo thing at like some hotel. Yeah, they can't find him. They don't know where he is. That's suspicious. A killer on the loose, and her dad is nowhere to be found. Is he going on a violent rampage? Is he? At the police station, Billy is also getting interrogated. They're like, why do you have an obsession with like going through her window? They kind of just want to know a lot of things. They want to know like why he was out at the time he was at, why he has a cellular device, which was the thing that fell on the floor when he hugged Sidney. I thought it was a phone. It's actually a cellular device. Billy is adamant that he didn't kill anyone. He just keeps saying, I didn't kill anyone. But like, obviously he's going to say that. The fate of Billy is that he is going to be held in custody until they get the phone records. There are a lot of reporters outside the police station, so Tatum and Sidney are told to go out the back. So they go out the back, but Gale still finds them and harasses them. Here we find out that Gale has written a book. Spoiler alert, it's about Sidney's mom. Sidney punches Gale in the face, like full on like punches her. The next scene is them in Tatum's room. They do a little debrief. First of all, Tatum has a very nice room, and she says that Billy was too perfect. She says that he needed to have a flaw. The flaw in question being murderer. This just plays into the entire idea of if things look too good to be true, or if things seem to be too good to be true, it's because it probably is too good to be true. Tatum's mom comes in and tells Sidney that she has someone on the phone that wants to talk to her. It's Ghostface. He says to Sidney that she'll know who he is soon. She's very upset. Dewey comes in, but the phone's already hung up. The next day at school, everyone is talking about the murders. If they weren't before, they're talking about them now. Sidney's mom is also being brought up again, considering this is all transpiring like a year after her death. Do you want to hear a little bit about Sidney's mom's murder? I'll tell you. The dude that was convicted, his name is called Cotton Weary. We find out that Sidney testified against him in court. So essentially, it's because of her that Cotton Weary is in jail. In other news, Billy is released because he didn't make the calls. At the front of school, there are a lot of reporters. A lot of them, which I find sick. Just let the kids go to school. You know what I'm saying? How do I use this? One of the reporters is actually this woman called Linda Blair, who played the little possessed girl in the Exorcist movie, which Billy was talking about at the time. Remember when he was like, oh yeah, Sidney, I was watching The Exorcist and it reminded me of you. I mean, I guess that only means something to you if you've seen The Exorcist, which I have, so it does mean something to me. Gale Weathers is also at the front. Sidney confronts her. At first, when Gale sees Sidney, she's like, whoa, 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 you step right there, which I mean is understandable because Sidney did punch her, but at the same time, the punch was well deserved, in my opinion. I don't condone violence though. I don't condone violence. I don't think that anyone should be violent. I think that love and peace and kindness should rule the world. Stream, treat people with kindness. By Harry Styles. Fun fact, when people used to fight, I would blast that song. Literally the other day, people were fighting, so I just blasted that song. I mean, it works because it gets everyone to stop fighting because they're like, where is that music coming from? And then when they notice it's from me, they're like, why are you playing that? And then everyone moves on because they stop fighting. I'm a genius. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, and we find out that Gale thinks that Cotton Weary is innocent. She thinks that, what's her name? Sidney, I forgot her name for a second. She thinks that Sidney falsely identified him. She also thinks that her mother, Sidney's mother, Maureen. Have I even said her name? Sidney's mother is called Maureen, but for most of the movie, I'm just going to refer to her as Sidney's mother. But she thinks that Sidney's mom was having an affair. She thinks that someone wore Cotton's coat to frame Cotton for the murder. But Cotton didn't actually do anything. And then Gail thinks that all the murders that have happened at Woodsboro are connected. She also thinks that Sidney is starting to doubt her own testimony, which you don't want to hear, okay? Because it's because of her testimony that Cotton Weary was put in jail, and it's because of her that Cotton Weary is going to get the death penalty. So, in times like that, you really want to make sure that you've got the right person. Gail now takes it upon herself to become a detective. She wants to figure out who the killer is, free Cotton, not just for the sake of humanity, but so that her book sales will rise. I mean, as long as the person gets found out, I don't really care about the motive. Just like get the person found, you know what I'm saying? The next scene is actually inside school. So we have Stu, Sidney, and Tatum, and they're all gathered around the lockers, just trying to set the scene for you a little bit here. And Sidney is like to Stu, is Billy mad at me? And Stu is like, what, since you branded him the Candyman? Now, the Candyman is also a movie that I will be talking about. So, again, stay tuned if you are interested. Just at that moment, two kids run down the hall in Ghostface costumes. Sidney is very upset about this, so she runs. Like I said, there's a lot of running in this movie. But she runs into someone. Now, who does she run into? She runs into Billy. Like, literally runs into him. And he tells her that the cops think that he's the one who scared away Ghostface when he arrived. So, thanks. So basically, Billy is off the hook. Billy is not the murderer because the cops set him free. And also, Sidney got a phone call from Ghostface that night. The same night that Billy was in jail. She apologizes to him. And then Billy's all like, you've changed since your mother died. Which, like, obviously she would have changed. From what I've gathered, Sidney liked her mom. So to have someone that you like be killed like that, it's like, duh, obviously she's changed. Billy thinks that it's been a year, she should move on. He wants her to start acting the way she was acting before. Sidney's like, what? Then he says that when his mom left his dad, he accepted it. And then Sidney's like, hang on a second. Hang on a second. Your mom leaving is not the same as my mom getting murdered. So good on her for calling him out because, yeah, that's completely different. Billy admits that that was a bad analogy, which, like, as he should admit, because, like, it was a bad analogy. And then he's all like, I want my girlfriend back. Sidney runs away. Billy calls himself stupid. The next scene is in the principal's office. Mr. Himbry is talking to the boys that were running down the hall in the Ghostface costumes. He cuts the masks up and expels the boys. Yeah, he's not in a laughing mood. So now he has the masks. The next scene is in the girls' bathroom. There are two girls in the cubicles talking. They think that Sidney is lying for attention and that she's actually the one who killed Casey and Steve. Because maybe she likes Steve and then killed them both in a jealous rage. And then the other girl is like, hang on, doesn't she have a boyfriend?
She has her own bubble butt boyfriend, Billy.
So if she's got Billy, then why would she want Steve? And then the other girl is like, because she is an SLUT, just like her mom. That went on my carpet. Okay, you know what, it's fine. It's fine. The rats can now have foundation. I'm kidding, I don't have rats. Yes, I do. Please. Hi. So yeah, these girls just continue trash talking Sidney and she's just there listening to them. And they leave and whatever. Side note, I love this powder. I think it's a really good setting powder. It also has a little mirror there. Sidney is not the only one in the bathroom. She starts hearing her name being called. This is relatable. I often, as well, hear my name being called when I am home alone. I think I actually am haunted. I know how Sidney feels in this situation when you think that you're alone and you hear someone calling your name, except in Sidney's case, she's not actually alone. There is actually Ghostface in there. But for me, I am alone. Before Ghostface even reveals himself, she like crawls across the bathroom floor, and I'm really sorry. All I could think about this entire time was germs. Germs. Bathrooms are such dirty places, especially public bathrooms and especially public school bathrooms. That very dirty place. So basically, yeah, it's Ghostface. He tries to get Sidney. She escapes. Classes are suspended and then a curfew is enacted. The curfew is citywide and it starts at 9 p.m. They still can't find Sidney's father. Despite the curfew, Stu, remember him? He is going to be having a wild party If I was in Sydney's position, I would 100% be going to Stu's party because there is safety in numbers. And remember, she's alone. And the killer is targeting people who are alone. So it just seems like a recipe for disaster for her to stay at home alone when, you know, the killer is attacking people who are home alone. We see Mr. Hembry, he's in his office. He's like trying on the ghost face mask when he does a knock at his door. So he goes out to investigate. He explores the school. Sorry, my nose is itchy. As he is exploring the school, he stumbles upon this guy called Fred, this janitor named Fred. And you know what? This is the part of the movie that excites me. Let me paint the picture for you. There is a janitor called Fred. He's wearing a red striped shirt, black pants, and a hat. The reason why this is exciting is because there is this movie called Nightmare on Elm Street, and the killer is called Freddy Krueger. He also wears a red striped shirt and a little hat and black pants. Do you see what I'm saying? I like when movies do little cameos and stuff like that, but that is not all because the actor playing Fred the janitor is Wes Craven. Do you remember him? He's the director of Scream, but he also directed Nightmare on Elm Street. I love when movies do stuff like that. Very sadly, Mr. Hembry then gets attacked and dies by Ghostface. And then the next scene is on a patio and we have Tatum and Sidney. Now, Tatum thinks that Sidney's mom, Maureen, she actually did have an affair. Sidney herself is a little bit in denial about it. Makes sense. I think the main reason why Sidney's in denial about this is because she's the reason why Cotton Weary is getting the death penalty. If she's wrong about Cotton Weary, that means that an innocent man is on death row. Tatum is then like, we have a long night ahead of us, which is both foreshadowing and irony. To add suspense, we then see Ghostface run through the trees, like behind them, like he's just like chilling in the woods. The next scene is at the film store and we have Randy, Billy, and Stu. Randy is like freaking out because Billy is standing in the horror movie section and he's like, if you were a suspect in a murder case, why would you be standing in the horror section when all the movies seem to be revolving around murders? Me, on the other hand, I'm more concerned about the fact that Billy is standing with two girls and he's supposed to be working things out with Sidney. Regardless, Randy thinks that Billy is the killer. He says that it's always the boyfriend in horror movies. Randy then thinks that he has a chance with Sidney. Like he thinks that him and Sidney are about to get together. Stu finds this hilarious and literally laughs in his face. Stu himself thinks Sidney's father is the murderer. Randy, on the other hand, is like, I think that Sidney's father is mutilated. Yeah, I think that's why they can't find him, is because he's dead. They mention a lot of movies in this movie. Randy's like, no, it's definitely Billy, and then Billy grabs him. So, perfect timing. I think Randy's a little bit scared because then he's like, actually, no, if this was a horror movie, I'd be the prime suspect. I think maybe it's because like he's like into all that like horror movie stuff. The town is going through a curfew, so everything is like deserted. Shops are closing, people are scared. Tatum and Sidney are getting snacks from the shops, like this convenience store looking thing. Apparently, Tatum told Stu to not invite Billy. In my opinion, I think that's just like not gonna happen because Billy and Stu are best friends, so. Anyway, they're in this convenience store and we see Ghostface in the reflection. I promised myself that I wouldn't compare this Scream movie to the other Scream movies, but I'm going to because they're in a convenience store and nothing happens. But in one of the latest Scream movies, there is a convenience store scene where Ghostface is also in there, but then he actually tries to attack them and attacks people. I actually like that movie's linked to the first one. Now it is time to revisit the police and Dewey. So Dewey has a little ice cream, it's very cute, and we find out that all the calls that have been made, like the Ghostface calls, they have been coming from a phone listed under this guy called Neil Prescott. Prescott, yes. Neil Prescott. Sidney's father. The calls are being made from a phone listed under Sidney's father's name. Sidney's father he's not looking too innocent right now. And then Dewey is instructed to babysit Sidney. Now it is time for Stu's party. Stu's house is very pretty, but again, it is very far away from civilization. Dewey drops Tatum and Sidney off at this party. He's basically there to just keep an eye on things. Now this party, I would say, is just like an average house party. There's loud music and there's beer. Gail, being her little nosy self, shows up in a van with Kenny because she wants to know what's going on too. Dewey is kind of talking with Gail and they both agree to go on a walk together. into the house. She's only doing it to get information, but Dewey's doing it because Dewey has a little bit of a crush on Gale. Ooh. All the kids are together and they're talking about putting on a scary movie, which I'm very jealous about. None of my friends or acquaintances or people I talk to that are my age ever want to watch scary movies. Like, none of them ever want to. None of my friends like scary movies. The doorbell rings, it's just Dewey and Gale, and Stu tells Tatum to go and get him a beer from the fridge in the garage, which, like, why can't he get it himself? Like, he can get it himself. Sidney definitely feels betrayed by Dewey, but Mousy is okay. You okay? We also have the same nail. Matching. Best friends. Sidney just wants to know if they found her father yet. Technically, they haven't found her father, but Dewey still knows some information about him. But Dewey's not going to give that information. Gale then walks around the room. There's like a TV against the wall and there's like a cabinet, and she puts a camera in the cabinet so she can like spy on the party. Creep. Tatum decides to get Stu the beer. She goes down the garage stairs by herself, but she goes to the fridge and she like stacks beers in her arm, and that's when the inside door, the one that like how you get into the garage, it closes. Then a random cat just came from nowhere, knocks some things over and runs out the cat's door into like the big garage. So there's like a big garage and there's a little cat door. Yeah, so there's a cat like then runs through it. Tatum then goes to leave out the inside door to get back into the party, but that door is locked. So she's like, okay, I'm just gonna open the garage door. So she opens the garage door, but then it is shut. Who shuts it? Ghostface. Now she's not scared because she thinks that it's Randy. Everyone thinks it's Randy. There's a very popular line from Scream that always gets quoted, and it's that whole, no, please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel. This part is where that line comes from. Tatum is saying it to the guy she thinks is Randy, which, spoiler alert, it's not Randy. She tries to go around him. He grabs her. All the beers drop and shatter onto the ground, and he slices her arm. One thing I will give all these people credit for is that they try. They try so hard to get away from him. She like slams the fridge door open on him. She pegs the beer bottles at him. And then she tries to escape by leaving through the cat door. Remember when the cat like ran out the cat door in the big garage? Yeah, she tries to go through that, but she doesn't fit and then she gets stuck in it. Ghostface opens the garage door while she's like stuck in it. So it's like going up. Pretend this is the garage door, right? Pretend this is Tatum stuck in it. It's like going up. And then she just gets like jammed at the top. There's sparks, there's electricity. Sadly, she dies. And she like actually dies. She doesn't come back to life. Like, you know how in some other movies people die but then they come back to life? No. Tatum actually died. She doesn't come back to life. Ghostface walking into the party. Sidney is like, where's Tatum? And no one knows where she is. Billy then gets to the party and he wants to talk to Sidney. People start leaving the party. So remember before when I said that there's safety numbers? Yeah, if this was me, I'd be leaving, because as soon as people start leaving, you have to leave. Otherwise, you're going to be left there by yourself. And when there's a killer on the loose, no. The garage door is not at the front for Stu's house, which explains why no one has seen her hanging from the cat flap. Sidney and Billy decide that they're going to talk and they go upstairs. Randy is absolutely horrified with this. Remember, he likes Sidney. He wanted a chance with Sidney. And now he's really not going to get any chance with Sidney. It flashes to Gale and Kenny. They are sitting inside the reporter's van. And remember that camera that Gale set up? Well, it's like monitoring the entire party. However, there is a 30-second delay. So everything happens 30 seconds after it actually occurred. Back to Billy and Sidney. Billy apologizes to Sidney. He's like, I'm sorry for being selfish. And then she's like, no, I'm sorry. I can't wallow in the grief process forever, which I just want to say, there is no time limit on grief and it takes people different times to heal. I also think that Sidney is being way too hard on herself. Like, her mum was murdered a year ago, so it's the anniversary of her death, so she's being very hard on herself. They start kissing and it flashes to downstairs where the group of people who still haven't gone home are watching a scary movie. They're watching Halloween. Randy has a set of rules to survive a horror movie. 1, you can never have sex because that equals death. You can never drink or do drugs. You can never say, I'll be right back. Stu then is like, well, I'll be right back. I'm getting a beer. Now, obviously, the beers are in the garage. Doesn't that mean he's going to see Tatum and report to everyone in the group that Tatum is hanging in the garage? Does he do that? No, he doesn't. That's suspicious, isn't it? Because why wouldn't he do that? Especially considering that's his girlfriend, you know? Gail and Dewey, let's check on them. Dewey is like, there's a car in some bushes. Gail, do you want to come walk with me to check it out? And Gail's like, yeah, Dewey, of course I will. More people leave the house. Sidney and Billy are having relations. Randy gets a phone call and finds out that Mr. Himbry, the principal, is dead. They found him gutted and hanging from the goalposts on the football field. And essentially, all the rest of the people who were watching Halloween, they're like, yo, we want to go see. So then they all like leave to go check out Mr. Himbry. Dewey and Gail almost get run down by all these people in cars that are leaving. They like tumble and then they kiss. Also, the abandoned car that they're investigating, who does it belong to? Sidney's dad. Sidney and Billy, if you remember Randy's rules, that is a whole big no. Sidney is then like, Billy, who did you call when you were in jail? And Billy's like, oh, I called my dad. And Sidney's like, that's a lie. The sheriff called your dad, not you. And then Billy's like, oh, yeah, well, like, when I called, my dad didn't answer. If I was Sidney, I would literally shut up. If I got any hint that something could be wrong, I would just be closing my mouth. Billy is then like to her, how can I prove to you that I'm not the killer? Ghostface comes in and stabs him. So yeah, poor Billy. Then he collapses to the ground and there's like a really loud thud. Sidney becomes a track star and she runs again. There's a very high-paced chase scene. It's running, intense music, shutting and closing doors. Sidney does the same like barricade door kind of thing where she closes the door and then like opens another door against it, and then it's like it works as a makeshift lock. I really like how this movie links things. Sidney's in the attic and she leaves through the window. She has a little tussle with Ghostface and she falls backwards. Thankfully not on the ground because there's like a boat underneath, so she like lands on the boat. This is the part where Tatum is discovered. As Sidney gets off the boat, she looks and she sees Tatum hanging from the cat flap. Randy is just sitting in the living room by himself. He's drunk, he's laying down on the couch. When Ghostface comes in, there's a very ironic scene where Randy is yelling at Laurie in Halloween, but he calls her Jamie because Laurie is played by Jamie Lee Curtis. So he's like, Jamie, look behind you, look behind you. Meanwhile, the Ghostface killer is behind him. Then it cuts and we see Sidney running and screaming towards Penny's stakeout van. Both of them then see Ghostface walking into the living room where Randy is laying. And remember the delay, so everything they're watching is a delay. And so Kenny's like, I've got to help the kid. So he leaves the van and Ghostface is there. And I'll reenact what Ghostface does. He has like a knife and he's like... So poor Kenny has passed away as well. Sidney herself is slashed, but she manages to escape through a little door. Then everyone starts running. Dewey and Gail are running, Sidney running. There's just so much running in this movie. Basically, Dewey, he's very fearless. Dewey runs straight into the house. Gail, on the other hand, runs to her van. She notices all the blood. She notices Kenny's gone. Randy then scares the life out of her because he comes to the window, so she bashes him with binoculars. Kenny is on top of the van, so when Gail starts driving, Kenny like slides down. How she gets him off is by like swerving the car so like he falls off. Sidney herself, she is in the middle of the road and she's like waving in front of Gail, but she's like all bloodied and Gail panics and it's like Gail then veers off and then she has a car crash and then she like crashes into a tree and like she's in the wilderness. Sidney then runs back to the house. I'd be hiding in the wilderness, waiting for everything to go away. As she gets back to the house, Dewey stumbles out and Dewey has been stabbed in the back. Like literally there's like a knife hanging out of his back. Sidney's like shocked, but she gets inside the police car and it doesn't start because she doesn't have any keys. It's like a whole scene because Ghostface is trying to get in and she has to keep like locking the windows, locking the doors. Anyways, she calls the police and then someone lunges from the back. She escapes. She gets to Dewey's body and she like steals his gun from him. So she has a weapon. Now enter Stu and Randy. Stu is adamant that Randy killed Billy. He shoves him down the front of the stairs and like Randy tumbles down and then Randy rises and then he's like, no, Stu killed him. Sidney trusts none of them. She doesn't trust Stu and she doesn't trust Randy. So she goes inside the house, she slams the front door and she locks it. Good on her. They like pound on the door and she's like, go away. Then, plot twist, Billy's not actually dead because he rolls down the stairs. So he like rolls down the stairs. He's like, Sid. So she comforts him. He's like, Sid, it's okay. And he like takes the gun out of her hands. Then he opens the front door so they can get help. Instead, Randy comes racing in. He's like, Stu's gone mad. And then Billy is like, we all go a little mad sometimes, and shoots him. He just shoots him. He shoots Randy. Billy shoots Randy with the gun that he stole from Sidney. Then he proceeds to lick the blood off of himself. Don't worry, it's not actually blood, it's corn syrup. And then he mentions Carrie, because that's what they used in the set for Carrie. Instead of blood, it was like corn syrup. I will be talking about Carrie. Sidney then tries to get away by running, and then she crashes into Stu, and he's holding a voice disorder. That's how they got the voice to do Ghostface. So now we know there is not just one Ghostface, there is two, and it is Billy and Stu. She tells them that they're never gonna get away with it, and you know what they say? Yeah, we'll tell that to Cotton Weary. That means that they killed Sidney's mom. So yeah, this is a lot to unpack. Now, according to Billy, what happened was Maureen, who he calls a sick woman, was sleeping with Billy's father, which caused Billy's mom to leave and abandon him. He then says that abandonment causes deviant behavior. Stu's like, we have a surprise for you. And then he leaves and comes back with Sidney's father, who is duct taped to a chair, like how Steve was duct taped to a chair. Also explains while Neil's car was at the front of Stu's house. It's important to note that it's almost midnight, meaning it's going to be the anniversary of Maureen's death. Billy and Stu's sick plan is all falling into place. Stu plants evidence in Sidney's dad's pocket in order to frame him. They're gonna shoot Sidney, pretending the dad shot Sidney, and they're gonna kill Sidney's dad. Sounds like he's really tough. To make this plan believable, Billy and Stu cannot come out of this unscathed. Now can they? Because that's gonna look suspicious. So Billy stabs Stu, and then Stu stabs Billy, but like really stabs it, and then Billy's like, no, give me the knife, let me stab you back even harder. But before they can carry out the shooting plan, Stu notices that the gun is actually missing. Who has the gun? Gail. So Gail didn't actually die in that car accident, and then she tries to shoot it, but nothing happens because the safety is still on. Her body is then like shoved down next to Dewey's. She's laying down with her eyes closed next to Dewey. Sidney has escaped with her dad. She calls Billy using the voice distorter. Then she's like, I called the police. Stu, he has collapsed from blood loss because Billy stabbed him too much. According to him, the only reason why he even accomplished Billy in the first place was because of peer pressure. Sidney calls Billy a mama's boy, and it's like, come and find me. Which, like, can we just appreciate the character development? Billy and Stu have very mixed reactions to this. Billy just throws a tantrum. However, Stu, on the other hand, he's very concerned that Sidney called the police. He's like, did you actually call the police? And then bursts into tears. Then he's like, my mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me. Meanwhile, in the back, Billy is just slashing pillows. Billy, is investigating. He's trying to find Sidney. He opens a random closet, and Sidney jumps out wearing a ghost face mask and like stabs him with an umbrella. Just as she's about to shoot him, Stu comes out of nowhere and barrels her into the ground, and there's like this intense tussle. She bites him and then shoves the TV on his head, and there's like sparks and electricity, and I think it's safe to say that Stu has also passed. So Sidney is about to go deal with Billy when Randy appears out of nowhere and like touches her shoulder, and he's like, I never thought I'd be so glad to be a virgin, or something like that. Because in his set of rules about how to survive a horror movie, the virgin always survives. Billy rises up, he punches Randy, and then tries to strangle Sidney. However, he is then shot because Gail has risen up as well. Billy clatters to the ground. He's like wheezing. I'm wheezing. I've been talking for like 10 hours. I'm not even kidding. Sidney helps Randy up. They all crowd around Billy, and then Randy is like, this is the part in the movie where the killer like gets up again, because killers never die the first time. Billy is like, but Sidney shoots him in the head. She's also like, not in my movie. At last, her dad comes crashing out of the closet, and it's like one last final jump scare. Now we gotta talk about the aftermath of the situation. So Dewey, remember Dewey? He is seen wheeled out on a stretcher. I mean, he was stabbed in the back, quite literally. Gail, she's at the front of the house. She's like got her little microphone here. Wait, hang on, I have a microphone. Let me reenact. She has new camera crew because Kenny is dead. Come on, let's move it. She's talking to the reporters, right? And then she's like, this is my big shot. Let's go. That's the end. So, to recap, Billy and Stu are taken down. Sidney's father was found. Sidney has gone through tremendous character development. We learn the truth about Sidney's mom and Cotton Weary. Everything is wrapped up pretty nicely, but there are still so many things that can be further explained if it needs to be, which it then is in the next movie. My conclusion for Scream, the first Scream, the best Scream in my opinion, Would I recommend this movie? I would 1000% recommend it, especially during this Halloween season. It's a very, very good movie. I, of course, did not explain everything, so I would highly recommend that you do go and watch it. You'll be able to see everything happening and everything panned out. I think it sets up this 31 Days of Halloween thing quite nicely because I feel like Scream is just such a classic. I've got to go now. Goodbye! Bye, mouse pack.